Have you ever felt that heavy weight in your chest from holding a grudge? Matthew 18 starts with a question that could change everything. Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Jesus responds by holding a child, saying something no one expected. He speaks of humility, of being small to be great. But what does this really mean for us today? Imagine living without the burden of pride, free to be your true self. Let's dive into this lesson that could transform your life. It was an ordinary afternoon, and the disciples were arguing about something familiar. Who's the most important? Jesus, with a calm gaze, takes a child and places them in the center. He says, "Unless you become like children, you will not enter the kingdom." A child doesn't seek status or hold grudges. Think about it. What if you let go of the need to prove yourself? Matthew 18 challenges us to rethink what we value, and this is just the first piece of the puzzle. Humility isn't weakness, it's strength. Jesus teaches that to be great is to serve, to put yourself in another's shoes. How many times have you seen someone rise by stepping on others? Matthew 18 says, that's not the way. There is a story of a man who lost everything to pride, but found peace when he learned to serve. Have you ever considered the impact of a simple act of kindness? This lesson could change how you view success. But beware. Matthew 18 also brings a warning. Jesus talks about causing the little ones to stumble. Imagine someone who, with a harsh word, pushed another away from faith. That's serious. Your words and actions have power to build or destroy. Have you ever thought about the impact you have on others? This part of the gospel calls us to reflect on our responsibility. What if your choices could change someone's destiny? Now, picture a lost sheep. Jesus tells the parable of the sheep that strayed, and the shepherd leaves the 99 to find it. That's unconditional love. Think of someone you've given up on, someone who seems lost. Matthew 18 reminds us that God never gives up. Have you ever felt like no one cared about you? This story shows you're valuable, even when you feel forgotten. And that changes everything. The parable of the lost sheep isn't just about being found. It's about seeking. How often have you judged someone without trying to understand? Jesus calls us to go after, to rescue, to welcome. Imagine the difference this could make in your family, your work, your life. Matthew 18 teaches that true love doesn't give up. If you were the shepherd in this story, who would you seek today? But it's not always easy. Matthew 18 also talks about conflicts. Jesus gives a step-by-step guide for dealing with someone who wrongs you. First, talk privately. If that doesn't work, bring witnesses. And if needed, involve the community. Sounds simple, but how often do we avoid confrontation out of fear? This approach is about restoring, not destroying. Have you ever tried resolving a conflict with this care? The result might surprise you, and if the other person doesn't change, Jesus says, treat them as a Gentile or tax collector. But here's the secret. Even Gentiles and tax collectors were loved by Jesus. He doesn't call us to hate, but to protect peace. Think of a situation where you had to step back to protect yourself. Matthew 18 teaches that forgiveness doesn't mean ignoring wrong. It's about balancing love and boundaries. Have you lived this? Forgiveness is the heart of Matthew 18. Jesus talks about forgiving 70 times 7. That's not a number. It's a lifestyle. Imagine carrying the weight of a grudge for years. Now imagine letting it go. There's a story of a woman who forgave someone who destroyed her family and found peace. Can you imagine what forgiveness could do for you? That's the promise of Matthew 18. The final lesson in this part is about spiritual authority. Jesus says, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them. That's powerful. Think of a moment when you felt alone, but a prayer changed everything. Matthew 18 reminds us that shared faith has strength. Have you experienced this? Before we continue, let me know. Can I move to the next part of the script? Forgiveness in Matthew 18 isn't just a concept, it's a practice. Jesus tells the story of a servant who owed a fortune to the king. He begged for mercy and was forgiven. But when he found a colleague who owed him little, he showed no mercy. The king, furious, punished him. This story is a wake-up call. How often do we ask for God's forgiveness, but withhold it from others? This parable forces us to look in the mirror. Picture the scene. the servant freed from an unpayable debt, but unable to forgive a fraction. Sound familiar? How often do we hold on to grudges over small things? Matthew 18 challenges us to let go of that weight. Think of someone who hurt you. What if you set them free, not for them, but for you? Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's liberation. This story has changed lives. It can change yours, but forgiving is hard. Sometimes it feels impossible. Jesus doesn't ignore that. He knows the human heart carries scars. Think of an old wound that still hurts. Matthew 18 teaches that forgiveness is a process, not a moment. Have you ever tried to forgive and felt like you failed? Don't give up. Every step counts. And this journey can lead to a peace you never imagined. The parable of the unforgiving servant also speaks of justice. God forgives, but expects us to forgive. If we don't, we reap what we sow. Imagine carrying the weight of unforgiveness. It consumes you, traps you. Matthew 18 warns, resentment is a prison. Have you felt this? Setting others free is, in truth, setting yourself free. This truth is tough but transformative. What if forgiveness was a gift? Not for the other person, but for you. Matthew 18 shows that forgiving is choosing freedom. Think of a true story. A man who forgave his son's killer and found peace. It seems impossible, but it happened. What's holding you back from taking that step? Jesus calls us to live without chains. Are you ready to try? But forgiveness isn't just about big hurts. Sometimes it's the small things that pile up. Comment, a small betrayal, a misunderstanding. Matthew 18 teaches us not to let these things grow. Imagine clearing your mind of these little stones every day. How would your life feel lighter, for sure? That's Jesus' promise. The story of the unforgiving servant reminds us of gratitude. We've been forgiven so much, but we forget quickly. Think of a moment when you got a second chance. How did it feel? Matthew 18 calls us to live with that gratitude. Forgiving is an act of love, but also of humility. Have you thanked someone for a chance you didn't deserve? And here's an invitation. If you're enjoying this video, subscribe to the channel now. We're only halfway through, and there's so much more to explore. Matthew 18 isn't just a chapter, it's a guide for life. Each lesson brings us closer to who we're called to be. Want to continue this journey with us? Subscribe and don't miss what's coming next. Jesus' authority in Matthew 18 is clear. He doesn't just teach, he lives what he preaches. Think about it. Someone who forgave even on the cross. That's the standard. How often have you judged without knowing the full story? Matthew 18 calls us to imitate that love. It's hard, but possible. What if you started today? Before we move to the next part, can I continue? Now, let's dive even deeper. Matthew 18 isn't just about forgiving, it's about living in community. Jesus talks about unity, praying together, seeking God as a group. Think of a moment when you felt part of something bigger. That's what Jesus wants for us. But how do we live this day to day? This part of the gospel gives us valuable clues. Community isn't perfect. Matthew 18 acknowledges that. Jesus gives clear instructions on resolving conflicts, but also talks about love. Imagine a church, a group of friends, a family united, even with differences. Is it possible? But it takes effort. Have you ever tried building bridges instead of walls? That's the essence of what Jesus teaches here. The story of a woman named Anna illustrates this. She fought with her best friend for years over a misunderstanding. Following Matthew 18, she sought conversation, listened, forgave. Today, they're inseparable. How many friendships have you lost by not trying? Jesus calls us to restore, to unite. This lesson can change your relationships forever. A community is also about responsibility. Jesus talks about protecting the weak, guiding with love. Think of someone who helped you when you were lost. Matthew 18 reminds us we're responsible for each other. Have you ever been that guide for someone? That's the beauty of living in community. Everyone grows together, and there's power in unity. Jesus promises to be present when 2 or 3 gather in his name. Imagine the strength of a prayer made with friends, with faith. Have you felt this? Matthew 18 invites us to live this connection. It's not just about going to church. It's about living faith together. How can you do this today? But it's not always easy. Communities have conflicts, differences, pains. Matthew 18 teaches us to face this with patience and love. Think of a conflict in your group. How did you handle it? Jesus gives us a map, dialogue, respect, forgiveness. Following this path can transform any group. Are you willing to try? Humility comes back here. To live in community, we need to set the ego aside. Jesus calls us to be like children, remember? Think of a child. They trust, they love, without complications. Matthew 18 challenges us to live like this. What would your life be like if you trusted more, loved without fear? That's the promise. And here's a secret. Community is where we grow. Alone we stagnate. Together we soar. Teen shows that faith is stronger when shared. Think of a moment when a group lifted you up. That's what Jesus wants for us. Have you found your community? If not, maybe it's time to look. This part of Matthew 18 is a call to action. Jesus doesn't want us to just listen, but to live. Forgiving, uniting, serving. It's all practice. Think of a small action you can take today to live these lessons. Matthew 18 is a guide for real life. Can I move to the final part?
Hemos llegado al final, y Mateo 18 guarda una última lección poderosa. Todo se resume en vivir con propósito. Jesús nos llama a hacer luz, a hacer la diferencia. Piensa en cómo tus elecciones impactan el mundo. Mateo 18 no es solo un capítulo, es un llamado a transformar tu vida y la de los demás. ¿Estás listo para esto? Repasemos: humildad, perdón, comunidad, responsabilidad. Cada lección en Mateo 18 es un paso hacia una vida más plena. Piensa en un área de tu vida que necesita cambio. Tal vez sea un rencor, un conflicto, o la falta de conexión. Jesús nos da las herramientas. ¿Qué harás con ellas? Una historia final. Juan, un hombre común, leyó Mateo 18 y decidió perdonar a su hermano tras años de peleas. Hoy, ríen juntos como antes. Esta transformación también es posible para ti. Mateo 18 muestra que nunca es tarde para empezar de nuevo. ¿Cuál será tu próximo paso? La respuesta está en tus manos. Pero vivir Mateo 18 requiere valentía. Perdonar, servir, unir, todo eso desafía el ego. Piensa en un momento en que elegiste el camino más difícil, pero valió la pena. Jesús nos llama a este camino. Es difícil, pero la recompensa es una vida sin pesos. ¿Has sentido esta libertad? Y aquí va una invitación. Dale like a este video ahora. Si estas lecciones tocaron tu corazón, presiona el botón de like. Esto nos ayuda a llevar este mensaje a más personas. Mateo 18 es un tesoro escondido, y queremos que todos lo descubran. Tu like hace la diferencia. Vivir Mateo 18 es elegir el amor por encima de todo. Jesús enseña que el reino de los cielos está en las pequeñas elecciones: perdonar, servir, amar. Piensa en alguien que necesita tu perdón o tu apoyo. ¿Qué puedes hacer hoy? Esa es la esencia del Evangelio: transformar vidas, comenzando por la tuya. Y no termina aquí. Mateo 18 nos llama a actuar ahora, no mañana, no la próxima semana. La urgencia está en el cambio que puede comenzar hoy. Imagina cómo sería tu vida si vivieras estas lecciones plenamente. ¿Qué te detiene? Jesús dice que es posible. ¿Lo crees? Este mensaje no es solo para escuchar, es para vivir. Mateo 18 es una invitación a ser diferente, a ser mejor. Piensa en cómo puedes aplicar esto en tu rutina. Tal vez sea una conversación, una disculpa, o un acto de bondad. Cada paso cuenta. ¿Cuál será el tuyo? Y antes de terminar, queremos escucharte. Deja un comentario abajo. ¿Qué te impactó más de Mateo 18? Tal vez sea la parábola de la oveja perdida o la lección sobre el perdón. Tu historia puede inspirar a otros. Comparte ahora y sé parte de este viaje. Gracias por mirar. Mateo 18 es más que un capítulo, es una guía para la vida. Quédate con nosotros, suscríbete, y descubramos juntos más tesoros de la palabra. Hasta la próxima.